would like to introduce the new Zenac Foketo Ikari 5610 jigging rod series. It comes in two models. The FS series is a spinning rod model and the FB series is a multiplier or bait caster model. And the rods have very specific features that I haven't found on any other rod on the market yet. The 5610 stands for 5'6" in length, that's roughly 167 centimeters. The range, as you can tell, by 150 to 400 grams is already very, very large, but the lightest jig I would use on this rod is about 120 grams, and if you have to, you can easily jig 450 grams with this rod, and it will always work the jig properly, so the rod is not too stiff. The optimum use is PE4 to PE8. I personally use PE6 on both of the rods. Perfect reel size would be a 10 to 14,000 on this one, and on the FB series I use a 4,000 size Ossia jigger from Shimano. The thing about these rods is that they are very, very versatile because the blank is a new development from Zenac. It's the Zenac Super Blank Ikari Blank, which is a solid carbon blank. It's a one-piece rod, and it is very, very flexible, very elastic, and that makes the blank very versatile for all different kinds of jig weights. We're fishing in the Northern Adriatic close to a wreck, and as I said, Northern Adriatic, shallow water, so actually we're going to use mostly jigs today. That would actually, by the spec, way too light for these kind of rods because we're expecting tunas anywhere between 100 to 300 pounds, meaning between 50 and all the way up to 150 kilos. Since there is very little current here, the water depth is only 37 meters, roughly 120 feet. We're actually using lighter jigs than what the rod specs would suggest you to do, but this shows you the versatility of the rod. This one is a tungsten jig from a duo tungsten jig, weighs 130 grams, 310 rod, which has an optimum jig weight of around 250 grams, but it'll work this jig absolutely effortlessly. The rod is equipped with all Fuji guides, Fuji SIG guides. It has Zenac's hexagon grip, which gives you a very, very firm grip. It eliminates rod twist. We elongated the foregrip, so in a strong fight you have a very, very high point of leverage to actually hold the rod. Fuji reel seat, and it comes equipped with a rubber end cap that you can take off when you have a gimbal for those really, really long fights with strong fish. You want to have a gimbal, it's way easier. The rear grip length has been made just perfect, so you can actually jig it under your armpit, or you can even have it in your gimbal for long stroke jigging. The ergonomics of the rod are just perfect for all types of jigging styles. As you can tell, for a PE4 to 6 rod, the rod is very, very slim. That is because of Zenac's new blank. It is called the Ikari blank. It's a solid carbon blank, and it makes the rod extremely flexible and extremely, extremely strong. I have personally never fished with a rod like that. As you can tell, the jig weight, the range of jig weights is already very, very broad, 150 to 400 grams, but you can go as light as 100 and 120 grams and all the way up to 450 grams. The rod will handle no problem at all. Even though the blank is very thin and very light, it is very strong. One of the most remarkable things of this rod is how it works a jig. If you work a 120 gram jig, the tip just animates the jig perfectly. And if you work a 400 gram or 450 gram jig, it will basically just do the same. It will just bend a little bit further. I personally fish basically in two areas mostly. Number one, my home waters are the Northern Adriatic here in Croatia, and our main target fish are bluefin tuna. The peculiar thing about this is that the fish are in the 100 to almost 300 pound range, but the water is very shallow and there is very little current. The main forage, the main food fish for the bluefin tuna here are small blueback fish like sardines, anchovies and small mackerels. That means two things. First of all, many times we need a very small profile jig in order to get a bite. And the jig cannot be too heavy because simply the water is not deep enough. It's nowhere deeper than 40 to 60 meters, which is about 120 to 200 feet. So most of the jigs I use are actually 120 to 200 grams, but I still need a rod that can handle a lot of drag power in order to catch a big fish. And this is actually the perfect rod for that, to fish for medium-sized bluefin tuna up to, let's say, 120 pounds, 60, 70 kilos up here in the Northern Adriatic. The second spot that I fish in is in the Canary Islands on the island of Tenerife, where the fishing is completely different. The currents are way stronger, the water is way deeper, and the main target fish are greater amberjacks, yellowfins, big-eye tunas, and albacore tuna. Here and there we also catch a wahoo. This is actually my go-to rod for amberjacks in the 40 kilo, 30 kilo, 50 kilo range, and for the yellowfin tuna in the Canary Islands, where we use normally jig weights up to 350 grams, simply because of the deeper water and the stronger currents. The rod itself has not just extreme flexibility and responsiveness, it also has a very, very strong recoil. That means it is not just that the rod bends, the force that the rod exerts in order to come back to a straight position is very, very strong, so you can actually fight large fish very efficiently and very, very fast. This is something I have never seen in any other jigging rod on the market. The rod, as I said, comes in two models, a spinning model and a model for the bait casting reel, for the multiplier reel. And there is a specific reason for using the bait caster or for using the spinning reel. The situation where I prefer the bait casting reel over the spinning reel is when I'm fishing for fish, or when I'm fishing in an area where the jig gets bit on the drop many times, because on a bait casting reel you can simply control the fall of a jig way easier. That happens, for example, here in the Northern Adriatic a lot when we're fishing around the purse seiners for sardines. We're fishing flat-sized jigs like the Hots Drift Tune, which have a fluttering fall, and I get a lot of strikes actually as the jig falls down towards the bottom. On a multiplier reel you just feel the jig stop because the line comes straight off the reel. It doesn't come off in an angle, and you always have direct contact with the jig. The other special feature of this rod, next to having the same hexagon grip and rear grip as the spinning model, as you can see, this rod comes in an acid wrap configuration. Again, all the guides are Fuji SIG guides, and the acid wrap does two things. First of all, it eliminates any torsion in the blank, because the guides that are standing on top of the blank, when the blank bends, it automatically has a tendency to twist itself, which can lead to blank failure. It weakens the blank, and it also makes the reel wobble. It eliminates the torsion in the blank, and it lessens the reel wobble. So fishing with an acid wrap rod like this makes it way more comfortable, and the guide spacing is just perfect. In no situation the line can touch the grip or the blank, which happens many times on jigging rods or bait casting reels. This will just not happen on this rod, even if you put a lot of drag on it and the rod bends all the way to the foregrip. The line will always be guided safely through the Fuji guides. Jig weight 170 grams. This time it's a slider. That means it's a jig that has this kind of action underwater. So you actually have to give it time and a little bit of slack line to perform the way it should. This jig is generally good for amberjacks, and when tunas are hunting garfish, they like that kind of profile. So we're going to give it a try. So basically, in closing, what is true for both of the rods is their extreme lightness, responsiveness, and the incredible lifting power that these rods have. You can really feel the power when the rod bends, with how much force the blank wants to right itself back up again, and it goes all the way down into the handle. It is a one-piece construction, so there's absolutely no weak points. There are specific situations where I actually prefer the spinning model over the bait casting model. That is, for example, when the fish are holding in the upper water column, I want to drop the jig really fast and I want to jig it up really fast. If the jigs are holding in the first, let's say 15 to 20 meters, which happens many times here in the Northern Adriatic when we're fishing around the purse seiners for sardines, and also on Tenerife when there's wahoo or yellowfin in the upper third of the water column, I really like to use my spinning rod, because the first meters of the spinning reel, they just come off very, very fast. So I can drop the jig really fast. I can even cast it in a little direction if I have to. That is the situation where I would always prefer the spinning version over the bait casting version. This is my go-to jigging rod for amberjack and tuna, generally fish up to 60, 70 kilos, roughly 150 pounds. Foketo Ikari 5610, that's this rod.